The Book of Adam is another version of the story that appears in Genesis of the conflict involving Adam, Eve, and Satan. It's called the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, and it was written in the 6th century. What makes this book so unique is that it concentrates on Adam's story. The serpent tries to kill Adam and Eve, but God foils him. He then casts the evil serpent into India. Satan also appears and tries to deceive and murder Adam and Eve, but each time God saves them. The book also goes into detail about Adam's life outside the garden and how sad and helpless he was. It talks about how the sons of God are Seth's sons, Seth being Adam and Eve's third child. It also talks about the Cainites who descended from Cain, the first murderer in the world. This is the book that also talks about the mysterious Nephilim, a race of giants who the flood wiped out. Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas was discovered at the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt in 1945. Historians speculate all these religious texts were buried here immediately after the Bishop of Alexandria announced the final version of the New Testament. Realizing that these writings were being axed from the Bible, somebody, under someone's orders, hid the few scripts they could get their hands on at Nag Hammadi. The Gospel of Thomas was probably written between 60 and 250 AD. It contains sayings of Jesus with no information about the deeds of his life, which differ from the other Gospels. There are 114 of these sayings inside the Gospel of Thomas, with the introduction at the beginning saying, "These are the hidden words that Jesus Christ spoke, and Didymus Judas Thomas wrote down." Modern scholars don't believe the Apostle Thomas wrote this document, and say some other unknown person probably authored it. The First Book of Enoch. The First Book of Enoch is considered an apocryphal work. This means not included in any scriptural canon. The only complete version of the First Book of Enoch is an Ethiopian translation from a previous Greek translation, which was made from the original Hebrew version written around the 3rd century. Enoch was the 7th patriarch in the book of Genesis. It was believed Enoch had received some secret knowledge from God. Enoch's story is so closely related to the god Utu that it's no wonder it was never included in the Bible. Some fragments of this book were discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but nobody knows exactly when they were written or who wrote them. It goes into serious detail about the origins of demons, why some angels fell from heaven, and the origins of the Nephilim. It also explains that the Genesis flood was a moral necessity. The only people who accept these writings as truth are the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees, also known as Lesser Genesis, was so thoroughly suppressed by the powers of Europe that not a single complete Latin or Greek version has survived. Protestants, Roman Catholics, and Eastern Orthodox Christians all despise the Book of Jubilees. The only group which considers it canonical is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The book claims to present the events which were secretly revealed to Moses while he spent 40 days and 40 nights on Mount Sinai. It's a fascinating take because it describes events talked about in Genesis and Exodus while dividing them into jubilees of 49 years. This is the Jubilee calendar, the Jewish calendar that marks religious festivals and holy days and sets the Jews apart from their neighbors while emphasizing the message of the Old Testament. The Hasmoneans immediately accepted the Book of Jubilees. It also became popular with early Christians. It became one of the key influences on the formation of Islam. It said God's words were written on celestial tablets, and then an angel revealed these words to the prophet Moses. The biblical figures are all depicted as prophets, and this was a huge divider between early Christians and early Muslims. The Apocalypse of Paul. The original version of the Apocalypse of Paul is lost. There are only redacted versions in circulation. Paul had a vision of heaven and hell, according to the book. It was this book thousands of years ago which helped shape modern beliefs about the Christian afterlife. Another interesting part about the Apocalypse of Paul is that some experts think they know where it was written. Researcher Kirsty Copeland argues that it was composed at a communal monastery in Egypt between 388 and 400 AD. It's an expanded version of the Apocalypse of Peter, but one of the key differences is that at the very end, Paul, or the Virgin Mary, differing from manuscript to manuscript, convinces God to give everyone in hell the day off. Every Sunday, the lost souls of hell get a brief respite from their suffering. And so on Sunday, people can sit around on their couches being lazy and watching football. The Four Horsemen. In the book of Revelation, the Four Horsemen are the harbingers of doom, those terrible riders who herald the end of existence. It's when the first four seals are opened that the riders come forth to start a cataclysm that will plunge the world into darkness and misery. The Four Horsemen are the most well-known in popular culture. We have the first horseman who arrives on a white horse, interpreted as being Jesus Christ or the Antichrist. There's the second horseman who rides the red steed and represents war and bloodshed. The third horseman rides a black horse and symbolizes famine, while the fourth horseman rides a pale horse and represents death. First, the white horseman shows up to signal the end of times. Next, the horseman of war comes to plunge the world into conflict and chaos. Next, the third horseman unleashes a famine that wipes out all the food on the planet. The pale horse of death comes to carry away the souls of all the sick and dying. And in the end, there's nothing left. This book is still just as valid for modern Christians who believe that the prophecies in Revelation have meaning to events happening now. They are encouraged, as the first century Christians were, to remain faithful to the end. Behold, I am with you always, until the end of the age. The Seven Trumpets. The book of Revelation is confusing. The Four Horsemen should be enough to obliterate the civilized world at the end of days, and yet there are a lot more miseries that the book describes during the Great Tribulation. One of the biggest and most disturbing miseries is the Seven Trumpets. When the being known as the Lamb opens the seventh seal, silence falls in heaven for approximately 30 minutes. Then God gives the seven angels standing before him 7 trumpets to blow. The blast of the first trumpet devastates the earth. A hail of fire and blood burns the trees and the grass until it scorches the earth. All living marine animals are killed by the second trumpet. The third trumpet turns the water bitter and kills all humans who drink it. The fourth trumpet then kills the sun, moon, and stars, turning them dark and plunges the world into blackness. The fifth trumpet releases Satan, who then uses his demonic influence to torment all the souls of the people left on earth who haven't died yet. The sixth trumpet brings an astonishing amount of death, releasing 4 angels and an army of demons to continue the killing. And finally, the seventh trumpet completes the apocalypse. The events have destroyed the earth, and it has transformed the kingdom of the world into the kingdom of the Lord and the Messiah, and it will reign forever and ever. The hidden meanings in the book of Revelation. Most scholars agree John the Elder wrote the book of Revelation sometime around the year 96 AD. He allegedly wrote everything which will transpire during the apocalypse, the details given to him by God. There were all kinds of apocalyptic writings from 2,000 years ago, and they all used strange and cryptic messages. But the people back then wouldn't have taken the words in the book so literally. The book of Revelation is so confusing today because all the strange scenes that seem so unintelligible were metaphors for the destruction of Rome and the rise of the Christian kingdom. Everyone still remembered when the Romans marched on Jerusalem and wiped everyone out just 20 years earlier. They considered the religious and political force of Rome a major threat, and the author of the book of Revelation conveys this threat through brutal apocalyptic images, which several centuries later were turned into religious scripture, which today is often interpreted verbatim. The Great Earthquake. The opening of the 6th seal is the end of everything. What happens is so terrifying and destructive that it will leave nobody standing afterward. The angel blows the horns after the 7th seal is opened, one at a time. When the 6th seal is opened, it blows the world to smithereens. The sun turns black like it is covered with cloth, the moon boils red with blood, and the stars fall to the earth. It catches the planet in a hailstorm of falling stars as the world quakes. An earthquake of biblical proportions disrupts all life, sending the kings of mankind, the greatest rulers and military leaders, the strong and the wealthy, to hide in caves deep in the mountains. And yet later, after the 7th seal is opened and an angel blows the 4th trumpet, the sun is turned black yet again. Could this be a permanent solar eclipse? The mark of the beast. If there's one thing we've all heard of from the book of Revelation, it's the mark of the beast. It's been in the news recently because according to some, the mark of the beast is already here. Now, in Revelation, the mark of the beast is described as something that will be given to all the rich and the poor, the freed and the enslaved, and will prevent those without it from buying or selling. And when the mark of the beast comes, so too does the apocalypse. Throughout history, every time a certain mark is given to people, some groups immediately assume it's the mark of the beast.